Hey everyone, Wayne Fox back with another video about the MacBook Pro. A few months ago I did one comparing my new 8-core 2.3 gigahertz version to the prior 6-core 2.8 gigahertz version, and surprisingly I found out that the 2.3 gigahertz clock speed really is kind of irrelevant, that in almost every task I ran it was running more at the 3.1. It still would heat up to the point that everybody claims it's throttling, and I guess that means if you cool it, it can run faster, and that's sort of the challenge in a MacBook Pro. And at the time I speculated on the new 16-inch MacBook Pro that everybody thought was coming. Apple surprised us. You've probably seen the 500 other videos compared to these, and so mine's going to be a little different than those. But Apple surprised everyone. Instead of coming out with a new higher-end model, they basically came out with a replacement for the 15-inch MacBook Pro. And not only did they replace it, technically lowered the price, because you can get things in the new one that you couldn't even get in the old one for less money. One of the features I was interested in was moving up to 64 gigabytes of RAM, because RAM helps a lot of things like Lightroom and Photoshop. And I also was curious to, I couldn't afford the 4 terabyte SSD before, but now it's a little more reasonable. And I usually, when I'm working in the field, I usually have about 4 terabytes of storage that I'm working with, because I have a little hard drive, 2 terabyte hard drive that, or a SSD that I usually am working with my videos and stuff on. And so I thought, I'm gonna bite the bullet. This looks like it might be the last one I need for a while, because it's really pretty efficient if it's anything like the old one. Now this processor is the same, but the graphics card's been majorly updated. Now we already found in the last video that doesn't really help Photoshop, but I do think it will help Lightroom some. Anyway, this is my old one, and I've got the new one in a box. Let's just pop it open real quick. I don't do many unboxing videos, so I thought I might as well take an opportunity. One thing that's interesting about Apple is how they pay attention to every detail, including the box they ship it in. To open it, you tear off the little thing, you open it, this pops out, these, and you pull it out. Well, let's turn over, it's easier. Now I can tell already that this one is going to be heavier than the other one by a little bit. I've heard it's a little heavier, and it doesn't surprise me. Other than that, it looks pretty much identical, other than this, pretty amazing, I don't know if it's amazing or not, but this big colorful picture on the front. And again, to open it, you tear the thing. They really, it's kind of interesting that they pay that much attention to detail even in their packaging, but I guess most high-end companies are doing that now. In fact, you get some stuff and it's like you think they spent more on the packaging than they did what you took out of it. So it looks to me like the out-of-box experience is going to be identical. This outer box is, interestingly enough, this outer box is stouter. This is pretty thick here, and the inner box is stouter. You can see how thick this is. This is a little different. But as far as the computer, it's pretty much the same. Power supply, everything's down on the bottom. This is definitely a more robust box. Not that that makes any difference. It's just kind of interesting. And we'll peel this again, and again, we'll be careful. Obviously, I can't use it when I sell this one, but I still have the one for this one. When I sell a laptop, I usually try to put it back in this and clean it up, so to the person buying it, it's almost like they're getting a brand new computer. There we go. And as everybody's shown you on the internet, it's slightly bigger, and I don't know if you can see this, but it is slightly thicker. Let's check the weight. Okay. Yeah. Maybe a little heavier, but it's not like it's like a world of difference. It's not that much heavier. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to set this up, and I'm going to try to find out some real world info on programs that photographers use. I'm going to run a major import from probably from my 150 megapixel digital back, or my 100 megapixel Fuji back. So I'm going to stress it even more than the last test. I'm going to run the Photoshop benchmark from Puget Sounds. That looked like a pretty good one. And what I really want to know, we found out this one was about 10 to 14% faster for most tasks than the 2.8 gigahertz 6-core model in Lightroom, and maybe not quite as much in Photoshop. And what I want to see if I'm going to see any speed increase due to the new graphics card, which I'm not expecting much on, except maybe in Lightroom. Check out the SSD, see if it's faster. I don't know if it's going to be any faster or not, but I'll run the tests, and in a few days I'll be back and we'll compare side by side. Also, I'll give you my impressions on if I think the larger screen does any good. Although I'll be honest, 99% of the time, 95% of the time, this is actually sitting there tethered to a big display. When I'm in the field is the only time I actually get a feel for the screen. So anyway, I'll see you in a few days and we'll go from there. Hey everyone, I'm back, and I will say this has been a little more of an adventure than I was planning on, and I've spent way more time than I really want to on something like this. I've discovered a few kind of oddities in the process. I didn't really expect the new 16-inch MacBook Pro to be that much faster. I thought, well, maybe with the extra RAM or with the graphics card, maybe I would see some little improvements. And to be honest, I probably did. Not as significant as the difference between the 2018 MacBook Pro and the 2019 MacBook Pro. And I really was more interested in the larger screen, the battery life, some of the other features. And I really wanted to get to 64 gigabytes of RAM because I actually thought that would make a difference. And it's too soon to say. I'm sure it'll make some difference down the road, especially when I'm doing multiple things with, I've got 5 or 6 major applications open at a time, such as I do right now. Anyway, what I probably should do is get straight into the test to show you my results and show you a couple of the surprises that I found. And then we can talk about that a little bit. And then at the end of the test, I'll probably just talk a little more about the machine in general, what I think of the new keyboard, the new larger display, things like that. So let's just go ahead and get into the test results, which I will say surprised me a little bit. Let's real quick just summarize. The two machines have the same processor, a 2.3 gigahertz i9 Gen 9 8-core processor. The 2019 MacBook Pro has 32 gigabytes of RAM, a 2 terabyte SSD, and the Radeon Pro Vega 20 GPU with 4 gigabytes of RAM. The 16-inch MacBook Pro has the same processor. I have 64 gigabytes of RAM, and I have a 4 terabyte SSD, and I have the Radeon Pro 5500M with 8 gigabytes of RAM. Basically, what I did for the test was I created a new user on each machine so I could start up the machine and disable everything that might be going on in the background. So there's no iCloud going on. There's no iCloud photo syncs going on. There's no iCloud photos in the library. I really wanted it to get down to just Lightroom itself was running. And if you see up in the top, I added this section of the screen here where I show the top processes running on the CPU. And right now you can see that Lightroom is going to be at the top. And if you follow this test, you'll see that other than Intel Power Gadget and Activity Monitor, there's really nothing else on the machine running. Another change was instead of recording these screens with ScreenFlow, so it was running in the background, I actually have recorded these screens with a video camera so that I could isolate it down to just how Lightroom is doing and Photoshop is doing. The first test was to import 100 Fuji GFX 50 files and to build one-to-one previews. And both machines performed almost identically on this. If we scroll through this, you'll see that processor utilization was really extreme. Most of the time we're running at over 1500% of the processor speed. The processor percentage is based on the fact there are 8 cores and 8 virtual cores. So that's 16 times 100%. That's where they come from. For this test, we ran about the same speed. And if you'll notice at the end of the test, the 16-inch MacBook Pro was only 3 seconds faster, just a negligible amount. One other thing to mention on this test is if you look at the clock speed, most of this test, the 16-inch MacBook Pro is running well below 3 gigahertz, which was surprising, especially considering the temperature is running in the low 80s. Power consumption doesn't seem to be too high. I'm not sure why this isn't running faster and I'm not getting a better time importing these files. I don't understand why. If the temperature's low and the clock speed is low, why the computer isn't cranking the clock speed up. That seems to be what should happen. Notice how it stays pretty consistent on the 2019. So I don't know if there's this obviously isn't thermal throttling, but it seems like there's something going on in Catalina and the new MacBook Pro that's throttling that down. Now maybe they just say, hey, it still delivers comparable results, and maybe this is a new philosophy to just not really crank the processor that hot. And I do know that if you put some real heavy stuff onto it, such as Final Cut Pro rendering and stuff, you can get those, you can get the temperature up pretty high. And so maybe this is just not that stressful of a task, and this is as fast as it can go. I don't know. So the next test I ran was to import 100 Fuji GFX 100 files and build one-to-one previews. And this test surprised me. As I scroll this, notice how the 2019 MacBook Pro is very, very poor at core utilization, and it's running closer to 2 gigahertz most of the time, even below its clock speed. And the thermals, it's clear down, and it's below 80 degrees, which is really puzzling. I'm not sure. If you look at the 16-inch MacBook Pro, you'll see that its clock speed is running more in the 3 to 3.2 gigahertz range. And notice its core utilization is far better. We scroll through this a little bit more. You can see that I'm not quite as good as I was with the GFX 50 files as far as utilization, but I'm still running at a high utilization rate. The fans in both machines are running, you notice the fans in the new MacBook Pro, the 16-inch, are running at pretty much full speed. It's one thing that I notice is a difference. Even though the fans are larger, the fans don't run as high. The right fan can only run at 5,600 RPM, and the left fan can only run at 5,200 RPM. If I look at the other one, you'll notice my fans are barely moving. I'm not, I don't know what's going on here. This has to be a problem with either Catalina and Lightroom, or Lightroom's implementation of the Fuji GFX files. I don't understand it, because this doesn't happen when you go back to Mojave and go back to Lightroom 8.4, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Anyway, if we go through to the end of this test, you'll see that it took 25 minutes for the 2019 MacBook Pro to import and build one-to-one previews. And I'll be honest, I think most of that was in building the one-to-one previews. If I look through the processes that were going on, it seemed to import them about the same amount of time, but it just took forever to build the one-to-one previews. And I really found that puzzling. So it's really not too valid of a test, other than to say there's something going on with those files and something inside of Lightroom, most likely. So the next test I ran was to export all of those files. And so I'm exporting 200 files. And you'll notice that in the beginning, the 2019 MacBook Pro core utilization is not quite as efficient as the new 16-inch MacBook Pro. There's a lot of, it's doing a pretty good job. And I'm not sure what all this spikiness is going on the power consumption. It seems to go up and then it goes way down. You'll notice whenever it goes way down, the clock speed goes down. The heat does spike a little bit, and then it drops. I mean, this still seems like a pretty weird thing. And I don't know if the process is, the beginning of this is the smaller files and it's more consistent, or vice versa. I just found that this behavior seemed odd. Whereas on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, I'm staying right around the 3 gigahertz range. I'm dipping. Yes, the power is going up and down, but it's going from 60 down to 40, where this is going from 70 down to 30. I really don't know what's going on here. Something seems weird. At the conclusion of this test, you'll see that the 16-inch MacBook Pro was substantially faster in exporting those files. I have a suspicion that this is related to the Fuji GFX 100 files, and it's, for some reason, Lightroom is having trouble rendering those. I'm going to do some more testing on this. I'm going to grab my A7R4 and see the results and compare those. I don't understand it, and in a minute I'll show you what happened on Mojave with a couple of things. Anyway, let's get on to the next test. Let's speed this up. So this is my Puget Systems basic Photoshop test, and this runs a lot of stuff. As with my previous run on this test, we see that Photoshop is very poor at utilizing multiple cores. The one thing I noticed different on this is the new 16-inch MacBook Pro GPU seems to be used more effectively than the one in the 2019 MacBook Pro. I'm not sure why. This test surprised me. If we get down to the end, and this is mainly where you're doing a lot of panoramas, you'll see that it's very, very poor as far as CPU percentage. It's mainly just using one of the cores, and it's quite slow. If we get to the end of the test, you'll see, surprising me, that the 2019 MacBook Pro ran it a little faster and received a higher score of 844 versus the 16-inch MacBook Pro. This puzzled me, so what I did was I ran it again a couple times just to verify it. Let's first review real quickly what happened in the first test that I ran. This is from the video I did, and you'll see that the 2019 MacBook Pro received a score of 806 versus 733, so substantially better over the 2018 MacBook Pro.
but you'll see that the same computer now is received a score of 844. And I'm assuming the difference is that Photoshop 2020 has some improvements in the use of CPU or GPU to improve the speed and the throughput. One of the things about this test I don't like is it doesn't actually tell you how long it took. And I did time it this time through, but I didn't time it the other times through. So I did run the test again, and this time the 2016 MacBook Pro, and I ran it 3 times, and it received an average score of 885. It was 885 all 3 times. When I ran it again on the 2019 MacBook Pro, I got a score of 851, so generally not much better. So I don't know what happened on this initial test, but both of them are substantially better than the previous generation, and it does look like the 16-inch MacBook Pro is running a little bit more efficiently and is a little bit better than the 2019. I'm guessing if I would have timed these out right, it would have probably been, it might have done the test about a minute quicker. I need to run that again sometime. To be honest, I'm really tired of running tests, and I didn't really expect a huge difference in these. And as my tests have shown for Photoshop and Lightroom, the 16-inch MacBook Pro probably isn't substantially faster. If you have a 2019 MacBook Pro, it probably isn't worth the upgrade if mainly what you're interested in is speed. Now, real quick, I ran a couple more tests. What I did is I put my 2019 MacBook Pro back on Mojave and Lightroom 8.4.1, and I ran the Fuji GFX 100 files again. And this compares the Fuji GFX 100 and the 16-inch MacBook Pro to the 2019 running Mojave and Lightroom 8.4. And as you can see, the 2019 is much more efficient in core utilization. Even though it does take a little longer, it's only about 20 seconds, not substantially longer. This is comparing the 2019 MacBook Pro under Catalina and Lightroom 9 versus the 2019 under Mojave and Lightroom 8.4. And the difference here to me is just astounding, because I do not know why the combination of the 2019 MacBook Pro, Catalina, and Lightroom 9 just do so poorly. There's no thermals going on. I just really don't understand this. I assume it's a problem inside of Lightroom and the way they're managing those files. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't know why moving to Lightroom 9 would have caused this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put Lightroom 8.4 back on Mojave. I'm going to put Lightroom 8.4 on Catalina and run this test. So then I can isolate whether it's Catalina or whether it's Lightroom 8.4 or 9.0 that's causing the problem. Wow, I'm glad that is done. That is a lot of testing, and I've spent hours and hours on this. You can imagine running 20-minute tests, and had to tie my machine up when I would have rather been doing other things. Anyway, I really don't have a lot of conclusions. I kind of verified the fact that the new 16-inch MacBook Pro isn't really much faster. There's some oddities going on, especially with Fuji GFX 100 files that I don't understand. I'm assuming those are a Lightroom problem, but I'm going to do a little more testing. And there does seem to be some throttling going on. There's several times I've noticed that the temperature is well below 90 degrees, and yet the processor's only running at 2.6, 2.7 gigahertz, which seems odd. And I don't know if that's because of the power consumption. I don't know if there's other things going on. It doesn't make any sense to me because I did see that in previous tests. So even though there's no thermal throttling going on, there seems to be some throttling going on. And maybe it's just being overly aggressive about not letting the temperature shoot up. I don't know. But it seems like Apple could probably improve the speed of the machine a little bit by tweaking the way the 16-inch MacBook Pro throttles. Certainly it should be able to run at a higher clock speed in some of these tests better than it did. Anyway, if you were thinking of buying it for a speed update, if you've got a 2018 MacBook Pro or one that's older, yeah, I think you'll see a nice speed bump. I think that Lightroom will perform about 15 to 20% faster for most tasks, unless you have a Fuji GFX, and then you might be disappointed unless you go back to Lightroom 8.4. If you're running Photoshop, I think you'll see a 10 or 11% speed. Now, I will admit some of that speed is probably from going to Photoshop 2020, because the 2019 MacBook Pro performed much better under Photoshop 2020 than it did 2019. It was faster and received higher score. So I've decided this video is long enough already. It's kind of tedious. I hope if you made it this far, congratulations. I don't blame anybody that didn't make it to the end. I decided that I would do a second video on my thoughts of the overall machine rather than make this one a lot longer. So in a week or so, I'll give you some, give me time to use the battery a little, test it out a little bit better, and also maybe decide a little more. I'll use the screen itself and just see if I feel there's any differences there. So I'll get that out in about a week, and maybe I'll have a few more tests and try to get to the bottom of this Fuji GFX 100 file problem. I still don't understand that, and I'm going to contact a few people I know and see if anybody else is seeing it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I might even reformat that 2019 MacBook Pro to a fresh machine, do a complete fresh reinstall of Catalina and of Lightroom 9, and see if the test is improved, and so it just is something really unique to my machine. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you sometime soon. See ya.